We're just going to try to rapid fire some of the easier players on here quickly, Alex, and then we will discuss some of the debates. So just to make it clear, I can only put on basically 2 players on each position, but there will be 3 keepers. Unless Alex has any, arguments, I'm assuming it's going to be Crepeau, who will be our starter. Dane St. Clair, Jonathan Sirois are 3 keepers. I put them in the 3-4-2-1 position. Just it makes sense for some of the players that we put in here, but again, it's not a set system. So Alex, let's start at the back with our center backs. I would say, unless you disagree because Richie doesn't look like he's going to be in this tournament, are you going to push Buchanan and Johnston as your 2 right wing backs, or do you think Johnston, after what we saw against Trinidad, will still be the starting outside right center back? And do you think Bombito will be after that? Those are the 2 I had, but do you have any other decisions for the outside right center back right now?
So what hat do you want me to wear? Am I Mr. Biello, or am I going for my natural instinct?
No. I want to do Biello because it's very difficult. I tried coming up with my 23. I did it earlier today. I know Alex will have some different opinion, but I want your Biello hat on because right now we know that Biello, it looks like will be there. There's no guarantee. Maybe they find a different manager. I highly doubt it. So for right now, just to make it easy, Biello hat on. What do you think he will do? 2 outside right center backs. And let me know in the chat, guys, who would you do when I go through each position as well, and we can obviously discuss it.
Well, it's Johnson Bombito, I think, for Biello.
Yeah.
We're going to go from that perspective.
Does that mean Waterman, Cornelius as your 2 centrals as well?
Yeah, and then it's probably Waterman, Cornelius, and then it's probably Miller and let's say Defugero. I think he's continued to impress and shown why he was deserving of a cap tie. I think there's a lot of competition at the CB position. I think it's going to be the one that's probably could look the most different by the opening game. If that makes sense. You got McNaughton, who just continues to knock on the door, and you can't forget about him. When Scott Kennedy's back healthy, you can't forget him at left center back too, because he's just been out injured, which is kind of why we haven't mentioned him as much over the last few months. Heck, there's a bunch of guys in MLS who can make a push. Kyle Hebert's battled an injury to start the year. Maybe he comes back with a bit of confidence and all of a sudden he's back in that mix. It's something where there's definitely enough moving parts where I'd be pretty comfortable naming this 6 today, but maybe in a few weeks it ends up tweaking slightly.
I think so as well. Very excited that Defugero looks to be in this squad. I think it's pretty straightforward. The one that, does bother me is McNaughton. I think looking at his form leading up until the Copa America, I feel like he's honestly battling with those 2 central midfielders, or those 2 central center backs, Waterman, Cornelius. And I just feel like they have the edge right now. Kamal Miller, Defugero as the outside left. I think it's pretty straightforward. We now move on to right wing back, and we are speaking as if Larea is not going to be there because it seems like a very difficult injury to come back for. I don't even know if the timeline would match up. I know it's 3 months. He got injured late March. So we're just going to assume for today's video that he's not available. He's got an injury. So for me, Alex, I went with Tejan as the starting right wing back. Naturally, without Richie there, to me, it's a no-brainer. I snuck Ali Ahmed in there. Now, I'm curious to see if you want to see him get pushed somehow in the middle and bring a different player, or what other options you were looking at for right wing back. But we know that, I want to get Ali in this squad. This is just, to make it look easy here on paper. But I slotted him into the right wing back role. Doesn't mean he has to play there, but you'll see because there's different players in different positions. So do you have someone else in mind in the right wing back, or do you think that's where we can, put Ali because he could be used there?
It's funny because there's so many names you could put there because Mathieu Chouanier played there for Canada last week. Because with Ahmed, he's playing right wing back for the Whitecaps purely only defensively. That's the plan when he's fully healthy. Is for him in out of possession. The Whitecaps play very rigid 3-4-3. They want Ahmed to be one of the wing backs, but in possession, it looks like the plans to play him as more of an 8, more of a midfielder in possession. So I wonder if for Canada, where it's maybe they're not going to be defending in a rigid 3-4-3, if it might make more sense for him to be listed as a midfielder and Chouanier to be as a wing back. But I think either way, both Ahmed and Chouanier are in the squad. They both can play midfield. They can both play wing back. You can kind of interchange and not be really, you can make an argument either way.
Yep, I'll go with your gut though. Which one?
Well, we'll put Chouanier because we saw Biello play him there, right?
Okay.
And we've seen Ahmed play more in the midfield for Canada. So I think it's just knowing that we'll stick with that for now.
That's fair versatility. It's something the national team has always had. Now we're going to roll on to left wing back. Davies, clear favorite. And I assume as long as he's healthy, Adekubi will be the backup left wing back. Any arguments? I mean, like I said, we have the two attacking midfielder positions, which will kind of incorporate, your wingers, maybe JD. We can kind of talk about that sliding down because we saw it there. Because I know everyone's going to be wondering where the mullet man is. So I would say maybe we keep him for that. But do you think it's going to be Davies and Adekubi for right now?
You have to imagine if Adekubi's back, he's still got a big leadership role to play, still at a high level. I guess, well, the only thing we'll see is how his recovery goes, because it's such a finicky knee injury, it sounds like, where it's like they really had to manage his minutes, and we'll see where he is in 2-3 months. But I imagine that the Whitecaps, they've been really planning to bring him back in the right way so that he's fully fit. So I'd put Adekubi.
All right, for our midfielders, Eustachio kind of as your DM, Kone as your CM. I guess we mentioned Ahmed could be one of the other ones. And then is the other obvious one as a backup to Eustachio, Piet?
Yeah, I think for now, Piet's his form has deserved him the spot. It's because if we're assuming Ahmed is listed in there, it really is until someone proves that they can win that spot over Piet in that number 6, because it's like, can a Victor Laturi have a strong end to the season and push in? Maybe, but for now, Piet continues to do very well at Montreal. He's one of the leaders on this team, and I think because of that, we see Piet stay in.
All right, Alex, we flew through this, but it's because I think a lot of the debate is coming in the front three kind of positions. And like I said, there's no guarantee this is exactly how Biello will play. It could be a 5-man midfield. Someone drops a little bit deeper, like a little bit ahead of Eustachio, Kone. Then you play 2 strikers. I kind of liked, after what I saw with David and the fact that Osorio wasn't even available, I kind of like the look of this 3-4-2-1. And like I said, just to make it easy today when we trying to come up with the positions, I think like a Liam Miller can go into one of those attacking roles. So could a Schaffelberg, so could a Brim, so could a Russell Rowe. We've seen him play there a little bit for the Crew. Corbiano could go in there as well. Someone that Alex really wants to see get a part of the national team, and a question mark I put up for a while now. How can someone playing in La Liga, second best league in the world, in my opinion, not be part of your national team? So a lot of question marks there, Alex. So for me, I guess the two kind of 10s, I'm going to put David in one for now, just because, again, we kind of saw him go there. And then I would say, whether you like it or not, I think Osorio could be one of the other ones. And then I would say Schaffelberg and Miller for my 4. Tell me why maybe I'm wrong. Why you want Corbiano? Who would you leave out? Do you think there's any way Osorio gets left out? Because I don't. So take it away.
Yeah, I mean, if we're wearing the Biello hat, maybe we can after this tweak and see what we'd change if taking off the Biello hat. But yeah, I think putting on keeping that Biello perspective, you probably Osorio returns for that leadership, David, Miller, and Schaffelberg. I think Schaffelberg's someone that even from my perspective, I think he stays in just because he's shown that he can be dangerous enough that in all games you can use him off a bench to stretch the game out and make something happen. And I think that's immensely valuable and that deserves a look. So yeah, Schaffelberg, I feel like, has earned his way in it. And I think it's telling that he got a big shift off the bench against TNT with the game at 1-0, which easily could have gone to some other players who were a bit more familiar with the team. It easily could have been a Piet to lock things down. No, Biello trusted Schaffelberg to go out and stretch the game and was rewarded with a beautiful goal, and he could have had more. So I think that's probably pretty fair. And I think from there, the last two striker spots kind of write themselves for Biello, which would probably be Haller, of course, and then Ike Ugbo. That's
what I think. That's what I'm thinking too. Like I put this together pretty quick. I'm not gonna lie. When I did it earlier this morning, I was expecting a little pushback from you. Just again, mostly
Biello perspective. You want pushback from me? I'll give you all sorts of pushback. we can get into that.
No, okay, that's fair. I didn't think this would be the exact squad you would take, but like I said, I had my Biello hat on when I came up with this. I still wasn't sure if there was a couple spots maybe you would argue that should be there, but yeah, I guess mostly from a Biello perspective, this is pretty, like, again, I mean, if Loreo was in here, it would make things a little bit more difficult of a couple of different spots. But again, from what we've seen from Schaffelberg, from Miller, Ugbo finding his way back in, I feel like this kind of almost writes itself. I'd be surprised unless there's a a massive turn of form for a couple players or some injuries if this isn't really close to what we see. But Alex, we have a couple minutes here, sort of, before we roll on. Just give me a couple tweaks very quickly that you would like to make, just to make it a little interesting. Sloppy Joe says, good exercise, tough on Bear, tough on Corbiano to miss out. It is, but like I said, I mean, looking from Biello and honestly just from form, like it was easier to cut those players than anyone else that I kept. But now we're having Alex going to go in here and he's going to try to shake things up for us very quickly.
Well, I think if we're going to shake things up, there's a few things. And I think the biggest thing is this the right formation, especially for a Copa America? And I think that's kind of the big question is, okay, this 3-4-2-1 kind of builds itself when you're looking at that, but is it going to be wise to go out and play a 3-4-2-1 against Argentina? Is that the way to go forward tactically? I struggle to say yes. Ditto with Peru, ditto with Chile, ditto in just any of these big games. We've seen it that what you need to compete against top teams right now, you need to be solid at the back. Of course, that goes without saying. You need a good midfield. Some teams go 3, some teams go 4, right? It's something where it feels like the midfield is as important as ever. And I think the $1 million question, it's going to be the one that it's tough for him to figure out, because we've seen Canada kind of bounce between it, is can you get away with 2 strikers in a top level game? You can get away with it in CONCACAF 100%. When you're dominating, you can have Laird and David. Like, for example, heck, against Trinidad, Canada had the luxury of basically Ugbo and Laird were struggling to find space, but because Canada had so much of the ball, Ugbo finally gets a look. He sets up Laird and they score. You're not having that luxury against an Argentina where you might not see much of the ball. You can't really afford to just have 2-3 strikers on the pitch who might barely see the ball. So that's where I think the big thing heading into Copa America, I just struggle to see a scenario where this formation will make sense. Then leading up to with the Netherlands, that friendly, is it going to be wise to be going up against some of those guys they can employ, playing a 3-4-2-1? So I do wonder if a 4-3-3 comes into play. Because I think you're going to have to cut some CBs off the roster. You're going to have to need more midfielders, and it's going to kind of tweak up the overall complexion of the squad. And I think that it all centers around a formation switch. And then, from there you could talk about, I think McNaughton could earn a push in, like we mentioned, Corbianu. I think, how Jaden Nelson starts the year can only be considered. And the wild card I'm throwing in, just because Canada, until they find someone who can consistently deliver set pieces, don't sleep on Junior Hoylett. I feel like that's something where, it's a bit of a bold, more veteran-based take, but I do wonder if someone like his caliber of dead ball deliveries could be considered.
If I was looking at just this roster and trying to find a way to bring in a Hoylett, I mean, I'd maybe leave out Azorio, because Hoylett can kind of play in that 10 a little bit as well. It can play in a wingback role. He's great on set pieces, like I said. But I agree, Alex. It's just so difficult to talk about playing in like a 4-3-3 when I have zero hope that Biello would make that type of change leading into this tournament. But I mean, hey, if another manager comes in, that opens up the door completely, which is why, the exercise, I guess, was to go for what Biello would do, which is why we find ourselves in this 3-4-2-1. Ethan says I was a little concerned in transition as Davies and Buchanan stayed really high in that game. That it is concerning. It's just considering that it is Trinidad and Tobago. I feel like, they had the ability to do it and kind of had a much less of a risk to getting burnt. There were still a couple of big chances for Trinidad, and like I said, it was far from a convincing matchup. I would hope that they wouldn't be naive enough under Biello or even themselves to get caught in that type of position against a team like an Argentina, because it would be a very, very different approach. But I definitely agree. There was not a lot I liked about that Trinidad match, to be honest. I know we got the job done, but again, far from convincing. Got a couple comments coming in saying Corbiano better than Miller. I don't think that's totally fair. We risk losing Corbiano to Romania, so he's already cap tied to Canada. He cannot go to Romania. And you said that Corbiano is in form and proving his worth, and he's playing in a more meaningful role than Miller. Unfortunately, none of that is true. Corbiano it does look good coming off the bench, and he scored a beautiful goal in Spain, but he is not a starter for them. He is an impact sub, and he's only came off the bench a couple times. Doesn't matter. It's still an incredible experience for him, and I'm so excited to see him over in La Liga. But Liam Miller is having a great season in the championship. He's one of the most important players on Preston. He's scoring goals, getting assists. I think he'd be a very difficult player to cut from this side. I do think, though, because of the injury that was reported on him before the Trinidad match, probably why we didn't see him. I don't know if we would have saw him over Schaffelberg, but I think the injury keeping Miller out gave Schaffelberg a massive opportunity to impress, which he did. And that's why Alex and I have, we have both in this roster, but I feel like, honestly, maybe in Bielo's eyes, I'd even put Schaffelberg a little bit above Miller right now. Not really in terms of what they're exactly doing for their club, but for what Schaffelberg continues to do from Canada coming off the bench, he'd be a tough player to keep off.